Gentlemen, welcome to the CBAN Showcase 2020. This is the inaugural event by Communications Business Automation Network that brings together the whole CBAN ecosystem of ICT service providers and technology developers who work collaboratively to automate the business of communications and to unlock the future of connectivity. The title of the first session today is Unlocking the Future of Connectivity, Who is CBAN?, where you will hear more about CBAN's purpose and mission, its goals, and the benefits your company can receive for being involved. I'm delighted to welcome the presenters for this session, who are Louisa Gregory, CEO of CBAN, Mark Halfinger, CEO of PCCW Global, and Joe Ruffles, CTO of CBAN. Before I hand over to Louisa to kick off the presentation, I would like to highlight just a couple of items. Firstly, please feel free to ask questions during the session. You can ask questions using the Q&A function on the bottom of the Zoom window, and our presenters will ensure there is time to answer the questions at the end of the session. Please also feel free to post extensively about the event on your social media using the hashtag CBAN Showcase. I would like to thank Louisa, Mark, and Joe for joining us this afternoon. And with that, I will hand over to Louisa to start with the presentation. Please go ahead, Louisa.
Thank you, Izzy, and thank you everyone for joining us today for the inaugural CBAN Showcase. Well, we've been 3 years in the making. We're seeing real progress now, and we're excited to share our latest news with you all, as well as our ambitious plans for the future. As Izzy said, I'm really pleased to be joined today by Mark Halfinger, CEO of PCCW Global, and Joe Ruffles, who also joined us recently as Chief Technical Officer to CBAN. And he's leading our technical efforts, which will bring both our solutions to production as well as support our members on a pathway to adoption. And we'll talk to you more about all of those things today as we go on. So if we could go forward, maybe 2 more slides. And just one more, please. Sorry, can we go forward 1 more slide? So in terms of thinking about our future and thinking about our future as an industry, and moving forward 1 more slide, at CBAN, we talk about how we are working to unlock the future of connectivity. It's the title of this session. It's the phrase that was referenced in the introduction as well. And this is because we know that connectivity and the consumption of data will be ubiquitous in nearly all of our interactions, if not already. The number of traffic types and devices that are set to deliver this connectivity to end users will only increase in the future, but it will also need to be at speed. As applications move to the cloud, high bandwidth solutions and connectivity will be very important. But as smart devices and IoT applications increase, there will be millions of transactions that will be occurring every day. And if we move forward 1 more slide, for the telecom sector alone, we estimate that this opportunity is very, very significant. We've spent decades as an industry investing in the infrastructure that will be critical to this future of connectivity, and we are well placed to take full advantage of capturing the revenue opportunities through connectivity innovation, such as on-demand services and edge services, but also moving up the stack to access new services revenue. The latest estimates, and this is not a CBAN estimate, this is based on research by various external bodies, including IDC, Telegeography and Delta Partners, estimates that these new services that we move up the stack with have an estimated value of $3 trillion US dollars. So it's certainly not an insignificant opportunity that we want to let pass us by. And if we move forward 1 more slide, however, we also know that the future of connectivity will require an increase in the way devices and infrastructure must interconnect. And that creates an increase in complexity for ICT service providers or traditional telecoms carriers to deliver. The end user will certainly expect speed, and there will be an increasing number of critical services that will be delivered via connectivity, meaning that if we don't automate the end-to-end supply chain for connectivity, including the billing and settlement processes, as a sector, we won't gain the full benefits of the future. So at CBAN, what we're doing is we're working to automate the billing and settlement process as that part of the supply chain. So next slide. Thinking about all of that, thinking about the future of connectivity, what does all this mean? And I'm now pleased to hand over to Mark, who's going to provide some more detail about what we believe it means for the future.
Thanks very much, Louisa. Thank you, Yusi, and good to see you again, Joe. And thank you to all of the participants so far who have joined to hear. What does it mean? Well, let's go on to a couple of slides, and I'll try and expand a little bit on Louisa's perspective. If you just move forward one slide, you see. Louisa started to allude to the fact that the world is evolving, perhaps in the baseline slide that she showed just a moment ago is around the shift from 4G to 5G, but actually we're sitting through a very complex and asymmetrically evolving ecosystem that has all sorts of different players, whether if you're focused on B2C or B2B, cloud, applications, connectivity, data centers, devices, all sorts of environments, whether it's the carrier infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, the data infrastructure, or applications that are being delivered by software or hardware-based connectivity that's doing point-to-point. Once upon a time, all these services could be productized in and among different product managers from a network to a network. Contracts would be organized in a written type of way, and activity would be settled, financial activity would be settled among service providers for these products unilaterally or bilaterally, but over a very long period of time. Now what we're seeing is that there's a strong movement into complexity, asymmetric products, the evolution of ecosystems in order to deliver services with multiple partners in the supply chain, as Louisa alluded to. That means also that the mediation and settlement that takes place in and of itself is also complex. You see, if you go to the next slide, I'll be able to just give you a different view. Cloud and connectivity. Cloud is delivering from its independent ecosystem, whereas connectivity might be multiple service providers. Connectivity also requires security. So too is security required in the cloud. How do we make sure that we're guaranteeing for low latency? Can we even settle for video jitter if that were to take place on the network? Well, what are all the different use cases? Whether you're looking at B2B or B2C or some sort of more complex environment that's facilitating logistics, operations, applications layers, as you look at code that's delivered from one cloud zone to another, from one network over a second network over a third network, perhaps multiple applications all converging in order to be delivered to a single enterprise or consumer. And all this now needs to be considered in much more complex regulatory terrain as we're starting to see changes globally in regulatory environment, not just from a privacy point of view, but also from a jurisdictional point of view. All of these informational and identity-based models also need to have some sort of measurement, value, verification, not just of addressing and settlement, but even of identity. And all of this is quite important. If you go to the next slide, we see that the legacy structure that we show on the left-hand side of the slide of a carrier, as we used to call it, instead of an ICT service provider, as we aspire to view the players who will be in the game and are already in the game today. Once upon a time, as I said before, those processes were linear, manual, and take ages to evolve. And we need to all focus as an ICT industry on how we get to a non-linear growth opportunity that allows dynamic and traffic flows, even very large traffic flows, even organized asymmetrically, that can be organized into contracts that perhaps can be coded, what we would refer to as smart contracts, and then have seconds perhaps to deliver that value and perhaps seconds to settle for that value as well. That would be the multi-dimensional digital ecosystem that we're headed to. In the next slide, I take that a step further, and you can see that getting to this new world, we have to seed the development of the ecosystem. We need APIs at the front end to interface between the different environments that are taking place. We also have to have an ecosystem alignment that allows us to smooth the relationships on onboarding, on interconnect, on all of the life cycle characteristics that we have of systems. The approach to alignment needs also components of standardization, how to manage the smart contracting that I alluded to before, And perhaps the most important piece of all is how do we bill and settle in and among the different components of that ecosystem over time using perhaps distributed ledger, which is what CBAN is about. Can we go to the next slide? In all of this infrastructure, it's necessary that we adopt collaboratively, inclusively, in this whole world of the ICT ecosystem, and never forget the very nature of what our business has been about for the last 170 years. Interoperability, interconnecting, and creating a ubiquitous experience across jurisdictions, but also across platforms of applications and services, which will allow us to function. In this circle, we put down a number of different industry bodies who are building out approaches to manage standardized environments. The ITU, ETSI, the GSMA, MEF, TM Forum, and MOBI. CBAN provides a financial settlement reference framework that can be adopted by all. Adoption, collaboration, inclusivity, with interoperability at its very core. And that's what the CBAN reference architecture is about. Broad cross-industry collaboration is what's critical if we're going to move together as an ICT service provider industry body. In the next slide, we can take a look. You see, if you wouldn't mind. Interoperability, as we focus upon it, has gone through various stages. In the network-to-network world, some years ago, we focused on network-to-network interconnects. Software-defined interconnection led about what a software-defined network looks like, but often within its own ecosystem. APIs started to create the environment that would allow software-based environments to interoperate with each other and to create that interoperability. Now we have to head together as an ICT industry to a common information model that would be accepted by all of those various industry bodies that we spoke about before, and ultimately assure that the technical framework also yields a commercial framework. And that's importantly about what CBAN is about. Interoperability will evolve ultimately from a technical environment that is accepted by the ICT service provider community to a world which would also be facilitated by a financial interoperability model, a settlement interoperability model. Next slide. So where is this opportunity? Well, let's take a look. The opportunity, I believe, is in extending the wholesale ecosystem, which would be inclusive of networks, of clouds, of different applications, various technologies that will drive these platform layers, but also to assure that the operations component, including the OSS layer and the BSS layers, can be delivered through a common reference framework. If we're able to do all of that, the commercial and settlement components, whether we're delivering all sorts of environments from different forums that are involved, and it can be TM Forum, it can be MEF, it can be ITU, it can be ETSI, it can be MOBI, it can be GSMA, all of these are quite critical. None of them, in my view, does CBAN seek to compete with. Quite the contrary. Rather, we seek to assure that there would be inclusivity, that we would all reach this common framework so that we can bind the ICT service provider community together through the most important, simple, common framework, which is the financial value settlement. And if we can do all of that, if we can make sure that that settlement is working well in and amongst all of the different components that I show on the right-hand side, I'm sure that the technologies will line up and certainly will be facilitating interoperability, hopefully as ubiquitously as possible, which will ultimately expand the pie for all of us a great deal. I hope all of you that are listening in will choose to join the CBAN community. Thank you very much. Oh, I should say, sorry, 2 more slides. I apologize. We want to give a bit of a commercial for what our colleague Shachar will be talking about, I think, tomorrow at the CBAN Showcase. First, as you explore the value of how this works forward, it's important to understand that there is a compelling business case. The compelling business case for all of this includes productivity, which becomes automated. And that will open up more horizons for your product environment to increase its profitability, and ultimately, as the pie grows, to increase the revenue. All of that will become necessary, not just for your own capabilities, but also for your end users. Automation facilitates that. In the next slide, we take a look at a bit of next slide. We don't have Shahar's thing about the 2.0.
I think that's in his slides tomorrow. So people will need to join tomorrow to hear more about that.
And you'll be able to get the idea, because the main messaging there has to deal, of course, with why using the CBAN 2.0 reference architecture can be valuable to all, and as a reference framework that can be utilized by the entire ICT service provider community. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. So as Mark said, we've created CBAN, and it's a body that has been created by the industry to support the industry. So I'm just going to take a few moments to talk a little bit about who we are and the evolution and the journey that we've been on, and then Joe is going to talk a little bit more about our technology journey so far. So if we could go forward one slide. So as the slide says, the spirit, and Mark talked a lot about collaboration, there's a desire for innovation. We've got a shared vision that because we've been created by the industry for the industry, that an independent body is what's needed to help enable and drive change. So we are independent, we're a member organisation, and we're creating an environment and a platform for everybody, every player within the sector to innovate and help drive change through automation. Next slide. As a non-profit membership-led organisation, we've been given a clear mandate on our role. So we grow and maintain the shared ecosystem. We coordinate the development of the architecture that Mark referenced, the services that will innovate the communication space, and then we oversee the implementation of the technological solutions and standards that will create the future of interoperability for all CBAN members. Next slide. And a bit of a history lesson. So it was almost 3 years ago, and in fact October may well be 3 years ago, where a ITW Global Leaders Forum working group wanted to explore whether blockchain could be used in this way, and that was the beginning of the journey. And I thank the Global Leaders Forum, as well as Mark's leadership and Carl Gribner's leadership for pushing this agenda forward and for bringing us to where we are today. So Colton PCCW Global were the first 2 carriers that then grew to a number of other carriers that were involved in the multilateral POC in Q3 of 2018. And from there, we have gone on to launch the CBAN SPV, which is now incorporated. We're building out the operations team, and we've secured funding. So we are now working at pace and at speed across all of our ecosystem to increase the standards and the specifications and make sure that this is an open journey for everybody. Next slide. We've had a number of members and contributors who've worked with us from the ICT service provider space over the last year in particular to bring us to where we are today in terms of the development of our architecture and the solutions that will eventually be adopted by all. We are completely open, as I said, and any ICT communications or service provider is welcome to join us as a member. On that note, I'm very pleased to announce today that recently Global Cloud Exchange and HGC Global Communications have recently joined the CBAN effort, and both member organisations will join the CBAN board as well to help to further our initiatives. Next slide. One of the things that I'm really proud of, and one of the things that I think has differentiated CBAN in terms of what we've been able to achieve, is the way in which we've brought together the technology providers as partners to us to develop and co-create the solutions that we're working towards. So these partners have been on board with us, most of them since last summer, and have worked with us in co-creating the solutions, and they're a very important part of our ecosystem. It is, as I said, part of our differentiation and part of how we will ensure future interoperability of our solutions. As part of the showcase that we're running over today and tomorrow, I'm very pleased that we have a number of these providers who will be demonstrating real use cases that they have developed that will use the CBAN reference architecture to create real solutions for the industry. Next slide. We've also ensured, as Mark referenced, that the work that we're doing is not done in isolation, nor will ICT service providers need to replicate this effort across multiple products or standards bodies. We work closely with the GSMA, with the MEF, with TM Forum, and that we will continue to expand that ecosystem with other industry standards bodies along the way. As I said earlier, most of our future interactions will happen over connectivity, and our infrastructure is critical to this. And that's why I'm also pleased to announce today that we've recently signed a Memorandum of Understanding with MOBI, the Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, which is a global industry consortium working to improve mobility, transit and logistics using blockchain and related technologies. Under the MOU, both CBAN and MOBI have agreed to collaborate to define core services for automated business processes that will be fully interoperable between CBAN and MOBI. This is truly a step forward to unlocking the future of connectivity, and you can join our session at 3 p.m. GMT tomorrow to hear more from MOBI directly and about the work that we'll be doing with MOBI. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Joe to share the progress that we've made on our technical front and the framework that we will continue to use to develop our solutions. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Louisa. And after that great motivation from Louisa and Mark, I'd like to spend a few minutes and tell you about how we're going to accomplish this and how we're going to operationalize some of these visions that we have for moving the industry forward. And it began with, as Louisa said, CBAN is a member organization. It began with our members identifying the use cases that were critical for their future business. And that's an important phrase because future business doesn't just mean services of the future, it means the business of the future. It means services that are currently in production, but could be better, could be more efficient, could have less fraud, could be more secure. It also means a platform for launching new and exciting services and more dynamic collaboration, as Mark described. And we asked our members, and we have coalesced around a number of particular solution stacks, MVPs as we call them, for different types of services, different sectors. And you can see them laid out here. The three that we have that we are moving ahead with at the moment are data on demand, and I would encourage you to join the session later this afternoon to learn a lot more about data on demand at CBAN and what we're doing to address that possibility, and also for some services which have already been in existence for a while, but are still going and still show promise for optimization and better collaboration. International voice and roaming, we have moved ahead with defining MVPs there as well. And we're going to be progressing all of these over the course of this showcase and in the working groups going forward. And we are working on them to bring them to the first level of production, as we'll see in a minute. But once we get that, then we are going to be moving forward to make them scale, to go wide and to interoperate and collaborate, as Mark pointed out, with other organizations to really realize the potential of widespread collaboration. If I could go to the next slide, please. So how are we doing that? In a simple way, as I said, we have defined the core requirements from the members for the different MVPs, and we have factored out what are the core CBAN services. You could think of them as similar to the core services in an operating system. What makes things possible? And then we have created, on top of that, those targeted solutions I was referencing, which all have their own pathways forward, and you'll be hearing a lot more about them over the course of this showcase. And this is really critical. As both Mark mentioned and Louisa reinforced, we are collaborating with the industry. The MOBI announcement is incredibly interesting, and you will also see tomorrow a panel session with the TM Forum, the MEF, and GSMA, and the CBAN, talking about how we as a set of organizations can collaborate with each other. And if we could have the next slide, please. Just to show you a little more concretely the path, this is another history lesson along the lines of Louisa's, but it's also foreshadowing where we're going. You can see that in 2018, we started developing what the governance structures were going to be, what the reference architecture was, and that has been moving forward to the point that now in 2020 going into 2021, we are reaching approval and completion of the governance structure, completion of the reference architecture on which all of these solutions will be built is targeted for the end of this year. And you can see we have a number of different MVPs for different vertical solutions that are progressing forward. A number of them, if you look at the current focus box there, a number of them have had a number of proofs of concept, POCs, and we are now in the process of productizing those and moving to production. So a lot of the work for what is going to happen to move this forward is happening now in the working groups and with the technology committee to move things from proof of concept to reality. And as you can see from the timeline, that is next year's challenge, to make this real. And then following that, we are going to be, again, scaling out. So more details about this will be obviously discussed over the course of the week at the showcase. But now to remind us why we're doing it, I'd like to hand it back to Louisa, who will talk about the benefits of the CBAN.
Thank you, Joe. Could we go forward one slide? Thank you. So I hope that you've had a taste by now of the reason for creating CBAN, the reason that we exist, and potentially even the value that we will bring to the sector as we seek to automate the process of billing and settlement in the supply chain. So if we can go forward one more. So we have been established essentially to overcome the industry's challenges. And by creating the ecosystem that we have through our members, the ICT service providers, the technology partners that we continue to evolve and bring on board, as well as the other industry bodies that support the sector, we will collaborate and work together to overcome some of the challenges that we've seen. I recently came across a paper written in 1996 that was talking about how the industry must seek to automate the billing and settlement of voice transactions. And 24 years later, we still haven't managed to do that. So CBAN, we are confident that that's what we will be able to achieve now. And we'll do that by reducing complexity, co-creating solutions on a use case basis, in a unique environment that we have established that, as I said before, is one of our differentiators. That contributes to being able to split cost across the industry because we're a member-funded model. We also increase innovation. So without an organisation like CBAN bringing the ecosystem together, innovation may happen in silos or may happen at a slower pace. But through collaboration such as what we're doing, we can increase innovation. And we can also lower the risk of investment when it's shared across the industry as a whole, and taking an industry level approach to solving these issues. We spread the risk across the whole industry rather than with certain key players. Next slide. So in terms of the benefits, and we'll talk a lot more about that today and tomorrow, you'll hear more from the leads of our working groups that exist at the moment at the 1 p.m. GMT session tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday the 4th, and they are leading the working groups that are happening now. Those working groups help to shape the evolution of CBAN. They have input into product development, and they work very closely with Joe to drive the technology roadmap and to have input into the products that we focus on first that are the most value add for the industry as a whole. As I said before, we can lower the cost of R&D. We give everybody equal access to much of the innovation that's happening in technology. As you'll see from some of our vendors, some of our technology partners who are doing demos both later today and tomorrow, they're developing some really cool, innovative stuff that by being part of the CBAN ecosystem, everybody can gain access to that technology innovation regardless of their size. And then as we all work towards implementing best practice, we create consistency and standards across our industry, which is better for everybody. And I think it also picks up on the point that Mark made around regulation, and it's better for our industry as an industry to lead on that rather than have the regulators lead us to that water. And we create networking opportunities. We're creating an ecosystem. We've got technology partners that haven't necessarily worked together before collaborating, and our industry associations are also collaborating. And again, it's to support our industry as we move forward towards a connected and automated future. Next slide. So we are accelerating the pace of change. If COVID has taught us nothing else, it is that we do need to think about how we connect more people, how connectivity does need to become much more ubiquitous for everybody. And in order to take advantage of that, how we need to automate that future as well. So again, we ensure that a common approach is taken to an automated settlement environment. Makes it easy for everybody. It creates smart contracts. It creates common language across the sector so that everybody benefits from that. We enable enforceable commercial trusted relationships. So blockchain, the benefit of blockchain is that it automates trust. Smart contracts are a feature of that, and it just means that it enables two providers to do business faster and in a much more automated trust environment. And we enable commercial settlement to happen in real time. In a world of Internet of Things where it is millions and millions of transactions at probably quite low value, settlement will need to happen in real time or near real time with on-demand availability and pricing. And it's only through automating that and through automating it via the platform that CBAN has created that we will be able to achieve that. And that's the end of the formal presentation. So very, very happy, all the panelists, Mark, Joe, myself, happy to take any questions from the audience. The Q&A, as Yuzi referenced, can be used to ask those questions. Joe, there's a question for you. What was the voice fixed detection use case that you mentioned? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, that's fixed voice fraud detection. The voice MVP has been looking at a number of elements that would improve settlement in voice, whether it's reducing minor discrepancies in records or CDRs between partners, whether it's general automation for anything outside of the standard sunny day process, but also a big motivator in that group is fraud, detecting, mitigating fraud. And while it is almost a separate entity, a separate set of requirements, it actually rides with and fits on top of the overall voice MVP. So you could say that it is a specific fraud-focused aspect of voice. And I would say, please come to the member session on Thursday, the last session, because we are going to be looking at what we can do to fight fraud with some ideas from some of our technology provider partners.
Great, thanks, Joe. The next question, I might ask for a perspective on all three of us. The question is, what do you think are the biggest obstacles of CBAN becoming a game changer for the industry? So I'll give my perspective, but from a technical perspective, it would be good, and Mark, from a wider, someone who has led the GLF as chair in the past, it would be great to hear your views as well. I think from my point of view, the biggest obstacles are we need the whole industry to come on board to be part of this and help to create the solutions together. When we think about specifications and we think about consistency and we think about creating interoperability, it's only when the industry comes together that we can really achieve these solutions. So as I like to call it, a Mexican standoff, where people wait to see what will happen before they take a plunge. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily committing today to adopting CBAN solutions, but what it does mean is that you're getting involved in the conversation and you're being part of the solution rather than waiting to see what may happen. And I do think the industry needs to help itself by coming together in this way. But Mark, do you have a view from an industry point of view?
I think obviously when you're at the some feedback, maybe Joe and Luis would be able. So I think that if we're able to look at how industry collaboration takes place, sometimes it's by mistake. Roaming, for example, the financial side of roaming was sort of a last-minute annex for what was an interim approach to a technical interconnect between networks some 25 years ago or more. And I think that what's necessary here, because the ICT ecosystem has become so complex, is actually a desire by everyone to get on board and to understand that there is value sometimes to have separate environments, but not completely separate ecosystems. That the real value is through interoperability, and the unifying component isn't necessarily having some unique technology, but rather simply the ability to financially settle for different types of approaches to give the user, whether it's a consumer, an enterprise, a government, whatever it may be, the best possible outcome of every application, every network, every cloud, every form of infrastructure. And so I'm hopeful that the only thing that everyone wants to do is to assure that there is a common framework to settle for value. The question asked was, what can prevent it? The one thing that can prevent it is somehow, perhaps errantly, some other body out there viewing CBAN as a competitor to something, which it is not. CBAN is meant to be an entity that embraces all of the different environments that provide ICT services. CBAN is not seeking to compete with some form or another about a standard. It's seeking to simply provide an umbrella framework that would allow all of the forms to embrace the concept of moving forward together for this small component of financial settlement of all the other technical use cases. So I'm hopeful that we can be bigger than ourselves and make sure that nothing prevents CBAN from being a game changer.
Joe, is there anything you wanted to add from a technical perspective?
I think the one thing, I think Mark covered it really well, but one thing I would add is that probably the greatest obstacle is inertia, which kind of goes back to what you were saying, Louisa. We need to start. And I would also add that we should start and move incrementally and build out, which was kind of the theme of our roadmap. We don't want to take an approach where we wait and try to solve absolutely everything and then go live in one big bang. We need to get infrastructure in place, start using it, and then start using it for more. And I think that the biggest obstacle to those things would be inertia, which I hope we can help overcome at the CBAN.
Thanks, Joe. The next question is about IP, intellectual property, when collaborating with other bodies. We are developing an IP strategy. We're working with a law firm, and ultimately it's our members who will decide that, or decide on what that looks like. So if that's important to you, I would encourage you to join now and have some say in what the governance is before the decisions get made. In terms of POC cases, I would say that yes, they are useful for the industry. It's useful to bring bodies together. We've seen a number of use cases, POCs that have been through. I mean, CBAN started from a POC that ultimately proved that this is worthwhile and it can be successful. So I think POCs are a very, very worthwhile way to test certain hypotheses, but then also to collaborate across organisations as well. Joe, did you want to add anything to that?
I would simply say, reinforce what you said. They're great learning experiences. You know, POC stands for proof of concept, and they have been very useful in proving the concept that this works. And they are also useful, as we've seen preparing for the showcase, they are useful for jump-starting collaboration, because you bring different parties together, different technology providers and different customers come together and work together in a way they haven't worked before. And that has provided incredible energy to our working groups. And I just wanted to, I guess, give a shout out to everybody who's put their energy into those POCs, because they're very valuable.
Great, thanks, Joe. And the voice settlement MVP, we've been working on that one for a long time. We certainly anticipate it going into production in 2021, and we're talking to a number of different partners within the ecosystem about that. So again, you could join as a member to hear more about that. A consortium of submarine providers. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Isn't CBAN the telco's way of creating a cloud application or the platform for many different applications down the road? Potentially, yes. I think that there are lots of things that we can. Blockchain is an enabling technology for many types of automation, not just billing and settlement. It can be used to automate any contract. Or many parts of the supply chain, particularly when it comes to managing identity. So I do agree, Mark. You may have a different view, but I think that CBAN can absolutely create that platform for many applications down the road.
Yeah, I think so. But again, I think that CBAN isn't necessarily meant there to be. You know, often when you hear about a cloud, you hear about one cloud competing with another cloud. And the only thing that I would want to disarm any clouds that are out there is that there's no intent by CBAN to compete with another cloud, but rather to create a framework for interoperability to the cloud infrastructure as well, and to the feature sets that are there. I think that actually it might open up a greater dynamic. We're seeing a number of clouds trying to engage in the telco and mobile co space in the BSS and OSS environments, leveraging the cloud capabilities that they're there. If they're already engaging in the BSS components of the business, why not then take out their own feature sets and interoperate with this environment as well? But I do agree, certainly it can become the framework for which there can be cloud interoperability from the so-called carrier-based space to the cloud-based space, each of them providing components of value to end users. I'll just address the question that was asked about the submarine concern. I'm not sure what the question was, but I would say I think it's helpful to highlight that when we sat around the room, Louisa, you, myself, and a few others, in order to create what the basics in the working group, which eventually seeded the concept of CBAN, we did have the special purpose vehicle environments that many service providers had used to create subsea consortiums, sort of there as a model of how service providers who normally might compete with one another might instead cooperate. And in that regard, the model of subsea consortia is useful to bear in mind. I think the thought processes here with the technical framework and where CBAN wants to go takes that thought process to a much greater evolutionary step, and it's very exciting.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I think we've run out of time, but there is a question about one thing that we'd like attendees today to take away back to their organisations. I would encourage as many organisations as possible to join the sessions. It's not too late to register. You can join for any session. It's free of charge, fully virtual, and that's the thing that I would ask everyone to do and take away the learnings back to their organisations. So we'll close this session. You can join the next session starting at 2 p.m. GMT, where Mark will host a panel session with some of our member organisations who will be talking about why collaboration is more important than competition and why carriers should invest and be part of CBAN's development. So thank you for joining today and look forward to the next session.
Thank you, Louisa, Mark, and Joe for that session. And we will now take a short break. And as Louisa said on the screen, we will be starting the next session on the hour. So that would be 2 p.m. GMT. Just like to remind everyone to post about this showcase on social media, so please use the hashtag CBAN Showcase, and also please visit a CBAN website if you want more information, which is www.cban.net. Thank you very much, and we will see you shortly.